Good morning, Year 10. Before we start today's lesson, here are a few quiz questions based on previous topics that you've studied. Please just pause this video for a few minutes, write down your answers, and we'll go through them together when you've finished. Right, let's go through those answers. So, question 1 asked, what does a microscope do? Microscopes magnify small objects and make them appear larger so we can see them. Question 2 was, what part of the microscope do you use to get a clear image? You would use the focusing wheel. Remember, on microscopes, there's normally two different focusing wheels, a larger coarse focusing wheel and a smaller fine tuning wheel. Question 3 was, what are the three states of matter? I'm sure you all got this. Our three states of matter are solid, liquid, and gas. Question 4, what state change happens when a substance melts? Remember, melting is changing a substance from a solid into a liquid, just like melting an ice cube. Question 5, what two measurements are needed to calculate speed? Well, if you think about the calculation for speed, you should be able to remember that the equation for speed is speed equals distance divided by time. In order to do that, you're going to need distance and time as your two measurements. And question 6 said, what is the SI unit for speed? The SI unit is just the standard scientific unit that we use to measure something. And for speed, we would measure that in meters per second. So for today's lesson, we're going to be looking at the cell cycle and mitosis. In particular, we need to look at the different stages of the cell cycle, and we need to understand why living organisms need a cell cycle in order to survive. We're going to be watching a short video to start with. Please feel free to make notes on the video as we go along, and then we'll talk about what's in the video after we've watched it.
In this video, we're going to take a look at how cells divide, and in particular at the role of chromosomes. All multicellular eukaryotic organisms, whether they're humans, plants, or walruses, require a continuous supply of new cells, which can be used for growth, development, and repair. This is particularly true for young organisms who need to grow in size. But it's also true for older organisms who must constantly replace lost cells. For instance, the skin cells, which continuously fall off our bodies. The process through which these cells are generated is known as the cell cycle, and it can be thought of as the life cycle of the cell, from the time it was made to the time it divides into two new cells. Within this cell cycle, there are three main stages you need to be aware of: growth, DNA replication and mitosis, and division, also known as cytokinesis. In the first step, the cell grows in size, and at the same time increases the number of subcellular structures it contains, such as mitochondria and ribosomes. Next, the DNA is duplicated, so that the two new cells will each have a full set of DNA. In order to understand the next stage, it's worth taking a closer look at the form that DNA takes within a cell. Usually, when a cell is not dividing and is just going about its normal functions, the DNA is spread out in long strings. However, once the cell starts to prepare for division, its DNA condenses into chromosomes, which are basically coiled up packets of DNA. The DNA of each chromosome contains a large number of genes, and these control the development of different characteristics, such as eye color. Eukaryotic cells, such as animals, have two copies of each chromosome, which we call a pair. One of these copies is from their mother, and the other copy is from their father. Humans have 23 pairs of chromosomes, so in total, they have 46 chromosomes. Other species, though, have different numbers of chromosomes, and this is one of the reasons that animals of different species can't reproduce to have fertile offspring. As the cell continues to prepare for division, it duplicates each of the 46 chromosomes, but the duplicate stays attached to the original chromosome that it was copied from, so that together they form an X shape. Notice that each chromosome is coloured half green. This is to highlight the fact that the right half of each chromosome is a duplicate of the left half that we started with. You might sometimes hear each half referred to as an arm. The result is that the DNA on the right arm of each X-shaped chromosome is the same as the DNA on the left arm of that chromosome. Once the cell is ready to divide, all 46 of the cell's chromosomes line up along the center of the cell. At this point, fibers from either side of the cell attach to their respective half of each chromosome. These are called cell fibers, and they pull the arms of the chromosomes to opposite sides of the cell. We call these two sides poles. As you can see, this breaks the chromosomes in half into two separate arms. This happens to all 46 of the chromosomes, even though we've only demonstrated it with 4 here. Now that all of the genetic material has been divided among the two sides of the cell, the third and final stage takes place, which is division, or more properly called cytokinesis. For this stage, the cell membrane and cytoplasm pull apart, forming two daughter cells. Notice that half of the chromosomes have ended up in the left-hand cell, and the other half in the right-hand one. Therefore, each cell has the same DNA, and the two cells are identical to each other, and to the parent cell we started off with. These resulting daughter cells can then contribute to growth, development, or repair, and undergo the cell cycle all over again. And that's it for now. If you enjoyed it, then please give us a like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
So one of the main questions that we need to be very clear on is why cells need to divide in the first place. Hopefully you saw from the video the two main reasons why cells need to divide are one for growth, because all living organisms, including human beings, grow as they go through their life cycle. And the other main reason is for repair. So if you cut yourself or you injure yourself, your skin will heal, your body will heal, and it does that by producing new cells to replace damaged cells. Or, for instance, if you cut yourself open, you will grow new skin, and that happens through mitosis. One other reason why some organisms require cell division and mitosis is to perform asexual reproduction. Some organisms can reproduce with just one parent. This is called asexual reproduction. And this always produces offspring that are genetic clones. That means that their cells have exactly the same DNA in as the parent cell. Asexual reproduction is quite common in plants. Strawberry plants are an example of a plant that undergoes asexual reproduction. There are some animals that also can reproduce asexually, such as aphids, although this is less common. There are advantages to asexual reproduction, mainly because it is faster than sexual reproduction and because you don't need other organisms to reproduce. However, sexual reproduction produces variation and asexual reproduction does not. So let's have a closer look at the cell cycle. The cell cycle has 3 main phases. The first phase is called interphase. The second phase is called mitosis, and the third phase is called cytokinesis. So let's have a closer look at each of the stages of the cell cycle. So during interphase, the first phase, the number of structures inside the cell, such as the mitochondria and the ribosomes, increases. The cell also copies or replicates its DNA so that it actually has 2 copies of each chromosome inside the cell. Once the cell has finished copying its DNA and increasing the number of subcellular structures or organelles inside the cell, interphase is complete and the cell moves on to the next stage, which is called mitosis. During mitosis, the chromosomes, which have been copied, move apart and the nucleus divides. The DNA, the genetic material, has now been split into 2 identical copies. Once this has taken place, we're ready to divide our cell into 2 daughter cells, and this process, the third stage of the cell cycle, is called cytokinesis. The original cell pulls itself apart and divides into 2 identical daughter cells, with the cell membrane reforming around each cell. Because the DNA from the original cell was copied, each daughter cell now has an exact copy of the original DNA that we started with. Okay, so we've now talked through the 3 phases of the cell cycle: interphase, mitosis, and cytokinesis. Your task now is to reproduce the table that's on the screen, and in the column that says what is happening, I'd like you to write in as much detail as possible what happens in each of the 3 stages that we've talked about. Remember, you can rewind this video and rewatch parts of it if that will help, and you can do this in any way that suits you, whether it's a Word document or writing it in your book.